Thanks everyone for watching this video. I wanted to speak in this video very briefly just around the concept of why addiction is like a relationship and why it's actually helpful to view it in that context. This has come up recently with a couple of clients, but sometimes I'm working with individuals and they may be struggling with some addictive disorder. And I think oftentimes as they begin to try to enter into recovery, they're surprised at the tenacity of how that addictive behavior kind of hangs on. Of course, you know, with addictions, they can morph, they can be at certain levels of intensity or severity. But someone might be coming in with, say, struggles with their with some internet type of disorder or something like that, and in their mind, it seems like it shouldn't be that big of a deal to let this go. Or someone comes in and they're struggling with, say, internet pornography or something like that. And again, they come in and in their logical kind of frontal cortex, they can say, this is just dumb, I have to stop this. Like, it's been far too long, I know that, there's nothing good. And yet they can't seem to follow through on what logically they know they want to do. And that's where we got to, it's helpful, I think, to look at addiction as much more of this relationship. So what do I mean by that? With any behavior or object that we are kind of going to get emotional needs met, and I do think that's what really addiction is in a lot of ways. Addiction is much more related to our attachment structure and how we learned to take care of ourselves emotionally. Ideally, we want to learn to do that through people, through a higher power, even through a good relationship with ourselves. But a lot of times through the course of our life, we actually started trusting objects or behaviors or substances much more than people. And when we did that, we would go to those behaviors or objects and we trusted them, and we'd go there when we needed to better regulate what was going on inside of us. So I feel sad, I don't go to people, I go to this thing that I do. I feel stress, I feel fear, I don't really talk it out, but I go to this thing and it seems to kind of blunt it, it kind of numbs the effect. And each time I'm doing that, I'm strengthening an attachment between my nervous system, my limbic system, and whatever this thing is that I do to feel better. So what's happening is that there's a part of my head that views it in one way, but then there's another part of my whole body that through experience will have a far different reaction. So when people a lot of times start this process, there's this internal battle, because there's two parts of us kind of warring against each other about what has to be done. The other thing too is, if we do say have like a close friendship that goes away, or when someone maybe gets like a kind of a fatal diagnosis, or we know someone going through that, we can talk about these stages of grief that individuals can go through. And it can start with denial, it can go into anger, there's bargaining, there can be a depressive state, but finally going into acceptance. And I think that's actually even a helpful way to view letting go of an addiction. In some ways, getting into recovery and letting go of our addictive processes is a grieving process. Even though we know it has to happen, and for a lot of my clients, at one point, this addictive process really saved them and really protected them and really gave them something that was important. And now they're being asked to let this thing go. And even though logically they know it has to happen, can be grief associated with that. So obviously denial is that first stage of trying to ignore that there's a problem. A lot of us can stay in that place for a long time. Eventually something happens that kind of brings them much more into the light, and we're being forced more into a process to take action. There can be anger with that. There can be resentment. We can be mad at God, mad at the world. Like, why do I have to deal with this? Like, this isn't fair, and I really don't want to, because I'm still a little bit ambivalent. We go into bargaining. Maybe I can modify this addiction. Maybe I can change it. Is it really that bad? Do I really need to go through all this work? Is there a way I can still hang on to this without having to give it up entirely? Because I don't want to. Moving into a depressive state, obviously many people experience that before we finally get to acceptance. And acceptance in addiction recovery is saying that it has to go. I have to let go of this. This is no longer going to be healthy, and I have to move on, which means I have to begin to build new relationships and new ways of getting my needs met with this addiction being gone. And for someone that traditionally their whole life they've operated a little bit in isolation, a little bit in secrecy, and they're not used to and not comfortable asking for help, that's a big ask. And that's why a really effective addiction healing involves community. It involves people. It involves interdependence. If we just focus too much on just not doing the behavior, we're not getting to the root of the issue, which essentially is based on of intimacy capacity and getting like our needs met emotionally with people in healthy, interdependent ways, which is where therapy groups and recovery groups are so helpful. So I just say all this to hopefully to be in some ways an encouragement. If this process is tough, you're feeling that sadness, you're feeling the anger, even off something that ultimately has created a lot of destruction for you recently, that can be very normal. And that's a part of how we're trying to work with our bodies and work with our nervous system and work with these complex neural pathways that have been built inside of us to let go of something. Because to our body and to these neural pathways and the neurochemicals released, it's just a whole different deal than the logical part that wants to make a decision in a different direction. So be patient with the process, understand that, go with the flow, go with the feelings, but just don't give up and keep resilient and keep getting the help that you kind of need. And also know this is something, because of everything we talked about, can't really be done too well in isolation. We've got to come out, we've got to step into the stress of going to people now when we're feeling tough feelings, going to people when we need help, and letting others be there for us in the way that we attempted to let the addiction do it for us in the past. Okay, thanks so much. We'll be back soon with another video.